I get interested in interviews, but this one I actually got excited about because the viewpoint is different. It's not good. When were you born? When did you start karate? What's your favorite dog, etc. But
Right.
when you're talking about transformations and talking about pivot points in your life, which ended up creating the individual you are or the direction that you took, I actually sat down and did a little bit of homework, and I
Nice.
started looking over my life. And honest to Pete, I've I have a list here that I didn't want to forget anything, and it's just transformation 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and anyway, yeah. So I'm a bit stoked about this. So
Welcome to the Transformations Podcast. Here, guests and I will share our transformative experiences and will explore how to find excellence in life. Yeah, people get confused. They're like, why do you have like a yoga guy on one time and then like a karate guy the next time? Because I'm looking at experience, the transformative nature of experience. You could be a sniper. I'm going to have you on. Like, I want to know all about that because I know that when I look at pictures and books or videos of wartime, the stuff going on in Russia and Ukraine, that those guys fighting in Ukraine have the same expressions and looks as like the Native Americans when the Westerners came over to take over their land. It's like that experience is the same. Shit, someone's coming to take our stuff, rape our women, steal our stone beads, and we got to fight for it,
right.
And so many people have experienced different states of consciousness from music, martial arts, being scared to death, so many different things. And this is really fascinates me.
Yeah.
So,
well, the other thing is, I think that a lot, from your books and writings and so forth, most people know you as, a Filipino martial artist. You studied under Cabales and then several other people, and finally met Yoda in Ilustrisimo, who actually, surprisingly enough, you'd be surprised, is one of my long distance mentors, so to speak.
nice.
Watching him, oh yeah,
Yeah.
But the thing is that I think what a lot of people don't know is the fact that you're a lot more varied, multifaceted than just being an FMA guy. There's your kung fu, and then there's your Oriental medicine, and this fact that you have study of other cultures, and then the fact that you've been to the Philippines 22, if I remember right, 22 times, plus the fact that you're based in Japan with Tuttle Publishing. See, I remember all this stuff.
You
The thing,
remember?
the thing is there's more of a breadth to the interest level of Mark V. Wiley than just hitting somebody with a stick. So
Right.
this is where I think it might surprise people that you have yoga people on, and you have this kind of, because your interest, I mean, my interests are kind of like this, and yours are out here as an individual, as a human being.
Right.
So,
A lot of people their interests are in silos, right? So you say martial arts and it's a vertical, and then there's like judo and karate and arnis and kung fu and all these different bagua and all these different things, but it's still in that silo, right? And maybe you can split it to two silos, internal, external, if you wanted to, but it's still a silo, and I don't know, just early on in my life, my interest went left and right and up, not just like I want to be the best dirt bike rider in the city, in the town of 10 people. And it's like, I want to do that. And I want to learn karate,
Yeah. Well, see, I'm a bit different in that I've got a silo. My silo has got several interests.
Yeah.
But it's one of the things I tell my students, what I know about, I really know about, and boy, what I don't know, I don't know. So there's a ton out there. In fact, one of the things I absolutely adore doing is reading and finding out what people do for a living, because it amazes me how many different ways there are to make money, to make your livelihood. And some of it's just fascinating. It's like, God, I would have never thought of that. So anyway.
And there's so many ways to have a great interest where you can't make any money, which sucks.
Oh, you mean like me? You mean like me writing books? Okay.
Or me writing books. Oh man. Well,
Uh,
let's talk. Let's
yeah.
jump into this. So first, public knows that Professor Dan Anderson is a grandmaster of both karate and arnis, Filipino and Korean, Japanese, American style martial arts, and
Mhm.
we can define that better as we go. And you're also quite an accomplished author. I mean, I think you've written as many books or more than me, which is, you know, especially in FMA, was impossible until you put your cape back on from the 70s and Super Dan wrote
Yeah.
Anderson.
That and print on demand.
Well,
That
yeah.
really helps. Yeah.
Yes, yes. And but let's start back with the reason one, not when you became, but what was it that triggered your interest in martial arts? You know, for me, it was I got bullied the crap out of, and my mom signed me right up, and I fell in love, and that was it.
Yeah.
It's the mafia. You don't get out when you're in love with it, as well as you know. But what was the trigger for you to jump into martial arts, and why?
Well, it was interesting because initially I was what I call a failed baseball player. I loved baseball, and I was in little league, and in practices I'm doing good. I get up to the plate, and I'd be shaking. I knew that fastball was going to come and hit me in the ribs. It never did. I wanted to be a pitcher. Excuse me. I wanted to be a pitcher, and in the last game, the coach allowed me to pitch because our lead pitcher slash best hitter was on vacation and we weren't doing very well. Says, yeah, go ahead and pitch. And we beat the guys 15-5. And
Wow.
he says to me afterwards, geez, I didn't know you could pitch. And it's like, what have I been complaining about this entire season? Let me pitch. Well, going from little league up to the next league was called Babe Ruth, and I knew I couldn't make it Babe Ruth. I was too little. So
You mean height and weight wise too little?
height and weight. Yeah. No, I was a little booger. And so anyway, so I kind of drifted for years and years. And I'm in junior high, and two interesting things happened. Number one is I joined Civil Air Patrol, which is a U.S. Air Force auxiliary. And you know, we study about planes, and we had uniforms, and we did an awful lot of marching. I still know the marching cadences, etc. To this day. Now, at the same time, uh, my older brother Don, you know, Don was the school hoodlum. Don was the school tough guy. So, being Anderson's little brother gave you a lot of leeway in being basically a wise guy. And you know, I had quite a mouth on me, but nobody was going to bug me because they'd have to mess with Anderson. And this was really good until Don got sent to reform school. Now, for younger people listening, reform school is like an underage jail.
Right.
So when Anderson was gone, there was no premium in being Anderson's little brother. So here we are. Here we are in the ninth grade, and and one of the guys was a captain in the Civil Air Patrol, like I just mentioned. Well, he did karate. Now, at that point in time, you look in the media, you know, what was karate? It was James Coburn going boom with a judo chop somewhere here on the muscle, and the guy goes. And at the same time, Bruce Lee is starting to come out as Kato. Now here's this Oriental guy jumping and screaming and doing all these yells. And as an impressionable little kid, you know, I'm kind of going, wow, this is cool. So I go to my first, so I talked to my mom, you know, I said, yeah, you can take a free class. We go to the class, and here's the fascinating thing. I'm in Vancouver, Washington. Okay, that's right across the river from Portland. If the state line wasn't there, it would be a suburb, but it's its own little town. There is no dojo. There's the Marshall Recreation Center. They have classes 2 nights a week. And my very first instructor, and I may have told you this before, but I can't remember, but my very first instructor is a green belt, Lorne Christensen. Now, Lorne Christensen now
Yeah.
is so well known.
He's well known today.
Oh yeah, but he's a green belt. I show up, and I either misduplicated the time that Dave told me, or Dave told me his class time. So I show up an hour late. You know, an hour late. And I was kind of like, and we're down in the weight room. All the weights have been moved to the side. Concrete floor. And it's karate class. You know, we don't have the divisions now, you know, where you have the mighty mites and the junior dragons and the tater tots and all this. No, it was all karate. So I show up late, and Lorne, bless his heart, the first lesson that I got was an instructor to a junior type of lesson. It took me really years to duplicate this, but instead of going, come back next class, you missed the first class. So he pulled over another blue belt, Tony Leonetti. Now, for all you history buffs, he was my honest to goodness first instructor because Lorne pulled him over to teach me. And oh gosh, I think I did downward block, high block, straight punch, climbing form, which is the long Zenkutsu Dachi stance, and front kick. And of course, being 1966, I had these tight pants on. So during class, that's right up the bottom, man, just split those pants right out. But I was in pig heaven. It was like jumping off the high board and not hitting water. So I went back, and I was obviously excited as hell. Talked to my mom. I think she paid the princely sum of, I don't know, 10 or 15 bucks a month. It was, these days it's just a drop in a bucket. It's a CD download, right? But at that point in time, you know, with prices at that time, it was more than 10 bucks a month. And what I didn't know at the time was that since she was a single mom raising 4 kids, it was a bit of a stretch for her. Yeah. But she thought it was only going to be 6 months. Nearly 57 years later, I have not quite hit the water yet. So that was how I began. And you know, and at the same time, Black Belt Magazine, it was a bi-monthly. And via Black Belt Magazine, I had gone from my heroes being Duke Snyder of the Los Angeles Dodgers, Sandy Koufax, Los Angeles Dodgers, Willie Mays, San Francisco Giants, over to Chuck Norris, Joe Louis, Skipper Mullins. And I would actually, and when they had the technique of the month, right? Oh, yeah. I would actually take that and learn that and then do that in the class. I remember one time, it was Chuck Norris did a fake backhand chop into a spinning back kick. And I'm doing this at home, chop, spin back kick. I go to the school or go to the rec center, and I ask Lorne, is this how this is done? And I do the fake chop and I do the spin kick. And I mean, it looks like a white belt fake chop spin kick, right? So it probably looks just horrible. But the look on his face told me he had never seen it before. and he gets this look of like, you know, the sensei look and goes, yeah, sort of like that.
And you're like, he doesn't subscribe to Black Belt Magazine.
Yeah, he might, but he'd never seen that spin kick. And so anyway, yeah, so that was, I would say, my first huge transformation, because up until that time, failed baseball player. I wanted to be an artist, cartoonist, but my dad spent more time with my older brother, Don, who was more talented than me. But you know, I was a bit adrift. You know, I didn't know. Oh gosh, I can't think of the term. Maybe it'll come to you or come to me. But you know, the family that's kind of screwed up, and you grow up in a screwed up type of thing. But it was home. It was family. It was like I didn't know any different. You know, these days when I look at it, it's kind of like we were one step away from owning our own trailer in a trailer park. Right. Know? And so I'm all adrift until, boom, this karate thing takes hold. And as it turns out, in all the different ways that I could have, you know, like I said, my older brother was a criminal. I mean, and he was good at it, so his life ended up prematurely. My oldest brother, he was one of these guys that was book learning wise, educational wise. The guy was brilliant. Did not have 2 brain cells of common sense to rub together, but he was just brilliant. So socially inept, you know. So I could have followed Don, I could have followed Dale, but whammo, I got this karate thing going on, and
you got Lorne,
and I got Lorne, and it set me on a path, and you know, that just nailed a 14-year-old kid.
Yeah.
Just nailed a 14-year-old kid. It's brilliant. I loved it.
Well, I want to dig into this a little bit. First, with a side note, is that I always get super humbled when I talk to people like you, who I think I've been in martial arts a long time, because, 54, started when I was 9, so that makes it 45 years. But you started before I was born. I mean, that's humbling, right? Because I wasn't even born and you were already making ranks and learning techniques and reading black belts and doing all of these things. And I just feel like, wow, it's like I'm able to time travel as an anthropologist, or like you said, an archaeologist.
That's the word, anthropologist. There you go. That's the word I was looking for. Yeah.
And I can go back and access your brain, your memory, your stories to learn about how things were before I got here in the arts, and the experiences. And that's of super interest to me, which is why I love these interviews.
Well, I tell you, and to be really honest, the reverse is true, because I remember, I was in with Professor Remy. Right. And so he was my only influence in terms of, and he's still to this day my prime influence in Filipino martial arts.
Yeah.
But when you started writing books, it was kind of, oh, hey, this broadens it broadens the subject by somebody who has been there. And it was really funny, because I wish I had kept it, but I still remember the first email that I sent you, or the first email exchange that we had, which was, we were both fans of the other. Because of, I had done what you hadn't done, and I preceded you by many years, but you had done also what I hadn't done in an area of interest. It was like, oh, wow. And then when I found out that we were principle driven as opposed to technique driven brothers, it was like, oh, we got a little brotherhood going here. So yeah, I don't know about the word humbling. For me, humbling, but it is utterly refreshing. It's utterly refreshing. And this is where anything I've done, accomplishment wise, I can push to the side and go, oh, cool. I'm a little kid again. I love it. So
I thank you. I much rather be a student than a teacher most of the time. Like, I keep looking around, like, who's local that I can just go take their class, because sometimes you just want to go and be told to train and just go through the motions, and maybe they say something that trickles in, like, I never thought about that for a horse stance, or whatever it is. Everybody's got a way of teaching and sharing knowledge, and I glommed on to your book, American Freestyle Karate, and that was like a keeper in my library. There it is. And
the hair book.
That was when you had the hair. And the flying kicks, and you had like math equations in there. You're like, and Greg Purifoy, who I was teaching Eskrima to, it's like, I'm having Dan Anderson, and what? You're having Dan Anderson? Like, how do you know Dan Anderson? Well, he's with Remy too. What? Dan Anderson's with Remy? And get my book, like, sign it. And then, like, I don't know, 15 years later or whatever, we actually met, and I hadn't done anything yet. I mean, I had written my first Serrata book. Maybe, I'm not even sure what year you came out to Greg's. But yeah, it was just like, there it is. And then you're like, hi, Mark, this is Dan. I'm like, Dan Anderson, you signed my book.
So anybody from the Pacific Northwest in the old days remembers Super Dan as
Super Dan,
this cocky young kid that, in my eyes, I was the karate Muhammad Ali, and I didn't see that I was, I was really ticking a lot of people off. But on the national circuit, it was yes, sir, no, sir, and really minding my manners. So I got to meet, and in certain ways, actually learn from, Chuck Norris. Chuck was big. He was the one who first told me that, Dan, there's only so many ways you can move the human body. That took years to sink in. But, guys like Jeff Smith, who in a hotel room after a tournament showed me how he did his side kick. Bam, that's how I did my side kick. Bill Wallace. Mr. Wallace. you don't know me, but I'm Dan Anderson from Portland, Oregon. Could you give me a pointer on my hook kick? We go outside the arena, we stretch and train for 20 minutes.
Wow.
Number one, Bill Wallace gives me 20 minutes of his time to work on kicking. And, and it was even when, we go all through the ages, and if you've got a certain kind of attitude, number one, you'll come across like kind. And if you keep your eyes and ears open, you will open things up, you'll learn things. Now, I remember, it's funny because, gosh, what was it? Midnight, something like that over at your place when we were playing sticks. And, both of us should be in bed. I was tired. But the interesting thing was, there's two things. Number one, three things. Number one, Dan, don't grab the stick so much. Dan, use footwork. And then you were talking about modes of engagement and gaits and so forth, which went right over my head. But the fascinating thing was, there was an aspect of Professor Remy's teaching, which when I first got together with him, he taught more classical. And then he started going more on the straight line, mano a mano, and the locking and so forth. But I had been taught, but I hadn't emphasized the early piece of the pie. And the thing is our playing reminded me that there was more to modern Arnis. There was 1980 stepping, moving, striking the arm, counter striking the person, yada, 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 instead of just going,
right,
etc., which made my art again go out like this. And to bring this kind of full circle, if you follow a path, and you follow a path with integrity, and like you said, you like being a student. I love being a dumb white belt. I love the freedom of making every stupid mistake and not having to be held accountable. Oh, it's liberating. Which I did that just 2 weeks ago in Detroit. I took 5 classes. Each one was outside of my comfort zone.
wow.
And it was brilliant. I
Yeah.
sucked at all of them. And it was a lovely suck. But I could be a student.
That's right.
Yeah, so it was terrific to cross paths with all these guys, but it is very much an attitude thing.
Mm-hmm.
If you've got the right attitude, and I'm not going to tell anybody to have this attitude, that attitude, next attitude. I know what's the right attitude for me.
Mm-hmm.
And that builds me up as not only martial artist, but that builds me up as a human being.
Well, I found some intel on my bookshelf. My copy of American Freestyle Karate, which is better than your copy because mine has your signature in it and a nice note. And it says 1989, September 9th.
There you go.
I was 20, so I was 4 years from having the Serrata book published. So I was really nobody, when we met. So there was no reason for you to have remembered me, but I was thrilled to meet you.
Thank you.
Crazy, because I had come out of Taekwondo. That's where I started, and the kicks, the sparring, all that kind of stuff. I wanted to get good. I wanted to be great at it. I only entered a few tournaments. I placed in, I guess, 3/4 or 4/5 of them, whatever. I didn't do many, but I just wanted to get better at it. And you had all these drills and theories, and one thing that you taught in your class, which I've kept with me since 1989 as part of my teaching. Somebody was like afraid when the reverse punches were coming or the front punches or something, and you said, "Don't be afraid." And they're like, "Well, what if I get hit trying to do that?" And you said, "Don't worry. Here's a way to get past that." And you were like slowly touching their jaw again and again, and like you go fast and slow down and touch the jaw, and it's like, what a way to get acclimated and not afraid. Like it's not mysterious anymore. It's just the hand coming.
Right. Yeah, it's funny because if we slide into transformations at some point in time here, that actually came out of my immersion into Dianetics and Scientology. And
I know you were, when we met, you were an auditor with this Church of Scientology. Are you still at that, or did you move positions, or?
I was on staff as a professional auditor at that time, and for those people who don't know anything about Scientology, you know, go research it, but research it from an open mind, number one, rather than a critic's thing, because anybody can criticize. And usually the people that criticize have a bone to pick anyway, so they're not looking at something clearly. But an auditor, if one translates just the definition of the word, an auditor, one who listens. And so what an auditor does is they ask certain questions, they listen, they acknowledge. The person who is receiving the auditing ends up coming to their own epiphany, their own conclusions. So instead of most counselors, okay, they will tell you, well, the reason you're doing this is because yada, 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 yada. Well, that would all be nice and fine if it worked. Now, my experience, that doesn't work. But you can get the person to inspect their life in various different ways so that they come up with their own conclusions. Now, before I get into the desensitization drill, let me give you something that that will an example out of my own life that it will explain. And so, just recently, I was getting some auditing, and one of my favorite sayings is that beer is one of the 4 basic food groups. I love my beer. But the cockeyed thing was there was a compulsive thing about it. I would never have less than 2 beers. And if I got the urge, I got the urge. And boom, I'd go and I'd get beer. And don't even get me going on Gentleman Jack whiskey. Smoothest stuff on the planet. And
I got water right here. Sorry.
That's okay. Coffee. This has a happy ending. So we're following down this periods when I abused, okay, drank too much, etc. Now, the screwball thing is, so we're going backwards in terms of my own particular time track. And we get to a point where my dad, he's holding me. And the big thing was getting a sip of dad's beer. And I'm remembering that, the beer tasted really horrible at first, but it was dad's beer. And after a while, you get that sip, you'd have that taste for it. You want more, dad wouldn't give you any more. Well, there's this one time where we're just going over this particular incident. And the thought hits me of the thought that I had at that time, which was, I want to be just like him. And there was this decision to pattern myself after my father. Now, dad always had beers, always, every night. He had either a Manhattan or a martini. And he was an outrageous flirt, and this decision, I want to be just like him, on the undercurrent, so to speak, gave me a compulsive push in the area. Now, the moment I spotted that, the only way I can describe it is my beingness, okay, just who I am. It just kind of went, and it settled. Now, here's the doggone thing, Mark. I have not had an urge for beer, alcohol, or anything like that since then. That was December.
Wow.
My favorite drink right now is large glass, 2/3 giggle water, carbonated water, 1/3 pineapple juice. The urge to have it, gone. Okay. This is an example of auditing. I found my own conclusion, etc. Now, okay, going to the desensitization drill. Now figure this. Everybody has had some sort of pain in the head before. You got whacked. You bumped into the cupboard. Your little brother banged you over the head with the G.I. Joe with the Kung Fu grip. Or. Fighting carries its own fears, okay? You watch Bruce Lee. Wah! The guy's bleeding all over the place. You watch Marvelous Marvin Hagler beating on Tommy Hearns. Boy, does that age me? Does that age me? You watch MMA. So you have all these conscious memories, but you all have all these little subconscious memories of some sort of impact to the head equals pain equals left exit stage left screaming at the top of your lungs. So the natural reaction of the individual, of the organism, is to retract away from the pain, or squint, or. So anything that comes fast at you can trigger that subconscious thing. So what I found through, and it's my own usage of this particular technology, was that instead of throwing a hard fast, let's reach. So what happens is, now you're seeing motion at a rate of speed that is not dangerous. Then when you contact, it's a baby's kiss. Once the person gets used to motion, they can handle, and this fear starts subsiding. And the fascinating thing is that I do this in my school to this day. When it comes down to sparring, they don't get to go fast until they're usually after green belt or approaching brown belt. Now that's very, very late in the game, but you ought to see them when they take that black belt test. They are beating and pounding on each other, but this subconscious isn't happening because the body, the organism, my own opinion, is so much tougher than people give it credit for. I mean, it's really tougher than people give it credit for. The individual is tougher. And I'm talking about the individual minus the body, okay? The spirit is tougher than people give it credit for. Like you were talking about all the different pains that you had when you were growing up. Okay. That's tough, buddy. That's tough. I mean, that's tough.
It's real tough.
You could have been the poster boy for American Pharmaceuticals had you not been so tough. But, knock on wood, I haven't had to undergo that.
Yeah.
But this terrific fear of getting hit, deathly fear. Okay, yeah, that was it. But anyway, by this method of teaching, what you're talking about is it takes away the restimulative effects of prior bangings by this continued familiarization, and so forth, until now what you've got is a tough individual, a tough being who knows what he's doing, who realizes that his body is tough, and then they can go play bumper bodies. And the fascinating thing that is the cherry on the frosting on the cake is attitudes don't come into play. I'll get some of my guys just beating the dog crap out of each other, and they come out of it. And after they bow, they have to shake hands. They bow out, boom, always shake hands. But the handshake is genuine. And so I'm glad that you retain that, because that's one of the most important things that I could ever impart to somebody.
It was really profound for me. It was one of my transformative experiences, because I was always afraid of super fast guys who are flexible, and I'm not flexible, and I never was. I had to stretch and stretch and stretch. The guys who are naturally flexible, where their feet just fly, because it's like effortless, and they could kick so fast and like tag you in the face, and I don't want to get tagged in the face, or the punch comes in so quick, and you're like, I don't want to get that. And I saw kids on the streets in sections of Philadelphia where I used to hang out as a teenager in Roxborough and Philadelphia, and just kids standing there and boom, knock out the kid for talking smack. And the punch is so fast, and I would think, could I ever block something like that when I'm 15 or 14 years old? This is when and for me, it was always that fear of the more not the fear of the pain of getting hit, because I was in pain all the time. I understood pain, but it was the psychological fear of the interaction, right? It was that kind of aggression that I was afraid of. But the front end of the aggression, or the tail end, I guess, is the punch, right?
Yeah.
Right. So having that as an idea, as a tool, as a concept of training is like, oh, so the aggression without the punch is emotionally hard. The aggression with the punch is painfully hard.
Doubly hard.
And it's like, okay, we got something here. And then what's interesting is if we jump 12 to 15 years somewhere there, forward from 1989, when I learned this from you, is Tatang Ilustrisimo did it with his blade.
I was just
thing.
thinking that, because when you're talking about that, I'm flashing back to your first interview with Dean and him putting you up against the wall and firing that blade until you weren't spooked anymore. Brilliant.
And that thing's got chips in it, and it's rusty. I'm going to get tetanus and die in Manila for no reason, you know.
Oh, yeah.
But it was the same thing. He's like, stop, not exactly in this way, but what he was saying was, stop zoning away all the time to do your defenses with the sword, right? Because I'm going to kill you with it. You know, walk toward it and talk about a transformative experience, a transformative learning process. Like, just walk into the weapon, change my whole method of play of Arnis, change the whole thing. And that's what made him special, is his ability to just, like, half the time he doesn't even block. It's just hit, deflect, hit, walk into the spaces and gaps. And, you know, the logo for my integrated scream is leak, flow, finish, right? Leak around the stuff, flow around, you know, flow, keep it moving and finish the encounter. And your method of doing this desensitization.
You have a hard time saying that too, right?
I can't say it. I was trying to say it last night on a podcast about Taoism, and I was a guest speaker, and I was talking about a therapy called EMDR. I don't know if you're familiar with EMDR, eye movement desensitization reprogramming, and I couldn't say the desensitization part.
That's where you need a sign. You just pick an eye movement, then you got the sign, and then you
just put it program. But this method of reaching, as you say, right, and reaching and then touching also shows the lines of the attack, right? So you get used to, this is firing from down up, this is firing from up down, this is firing from the shoulder, this is firing from the middle, this is firing from the side, where you can also you see those lines.
Yes.
And then you can see the non-lines, you know, the open spaces.
Yes.
So there's multi-levels to it. I mean, it's quite a thing, Super Dan.
Well, you know, it's whatever you're doing. It can be punch kick, it can be knife, it can be stick, it can be grapple or whatever. But as one has trained and as one has experienced, if you pay attention to the other guy, not just what you're, I'm big on paying attention to the other guy. Then what happens is that you become familiar with this, you become familiar with that, you become familiar with this, that, and the next thing. And after a while, your recognition abilities start going like this. Let me give you an example. I was at the Musashi Alliance camp 2 weekends ago in Detroit, Michigan. Jay Spiro had put it on. And I'm teaching a class on what people in modern arnis would call the dance of pain, which is flowing locks. Okay. Not one of my greatest strengths. I can do it. I'm okay with it. But, you know, I would rather apply the Downey rule, which is, if you're going to take somebody to the cleaners, you might as well use some laundry fabric first. Hit them and then lock them up. I have a whole bunch of rules like that. But anyway, so the tail end of the class, I was showing, okay, here is how you use the concept of the flow to counter a joint lock. And I said, the template is extremely simple. One, you have to understand that a joint lock is a precision position. So you pay attention to the guy, you know, the guy's doing the wrist lock, pay attention this way. So you get the feel of, okay, are there 4 fingers or is there 1 finger on the back of your hand? Are there 4 fingers in the palm or is it the thumb? First thing, just by feel, you know what it is just by touch. Now you've got the travel route. Okay, oh, it goes over here. Now we have an endpoint that goes, ow, that's where you don't want to arrive. So paying attention to the person, and usually most people, you know, when they're executing, it's like, and then time for the other person to execute, they go, that doggone Joe Biden or Donald Trump, depending on what political thing. I just can't believe the mess that they've gotten in this country. And it's like, oh, it's my turn. You know, they concentrate when they do, but they don't concentrate really on the receiving, which is, to me, about 2/3 the training on the receiving. So I'm showing this. I'm showing, okay, so what the template is number 1, contribute to the motion. change directions. So if you, let's say, if this is going 10 miles an hour, good, contribute, make it go 12. You take over their leading. And then if this is where you don't want to go, good, go somewhere else.
Right.
And it blows the lock. So I'm demonstrating this, and I've done this with people all over the place. I had a couple of Leon J's guys in London, and my usual parlor trick is they'll do the right arm and I go, well, I'm cheating. I use my right hand. Here, use my left hand. Da, 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 and I'm still foiling it. It says, I'll tell you what, I'll close my eyes, and so forth. And because I'm familiar with so many of these dadgum locks, I know where they're going to go. And I had this happen with, there's a guy by the name of Mike Sharon. He in Detroit, nice guy, always communicating with me back and forth. You're brute. And I go, yeah, Mike, come on over. Yeah, do this. And instead of, the normal demonstration, he goes ballistic on me, high speed. And because of the positioning and the recognition that he had that he went speed at touch, he starts doing this lock, and I counter it, pull him close to me, and I smile at him and say, that's a nice try. Good luck, Uncle Buck.
Did you give him a kiss?
Very close. I was close enough to give him a kiss. But the whole upshot of it is recognition, okay, coming from all of the training. Okay, I think this is what, Musashi's Book of the Five Rings, the scroll number 5, the void. That's what the void was. It's nothing ethereal. It's nothing, etc. He had 60 death duels. We're not talking fist fights, man. We're talking katana. We're talking in like the Demolition Man. Man, we're talking murder, death, kill. And he came on top of 60 of those. So his recognition of what was real, what was not real, was incredible. So we go all the way back to what you mentioned about watching the punch, and you see the lines. At a certain point, you see the lines. You recognize the lines, and you act accordingly. See, this is one of the things that I mentioned, that Tatang was a long distance mentor. His simplicity. He had been in enough bang bang fights. He had a couple of kills. The guy was real deal, and he had taken probably this wealth of knowledge and went, bing, just like that. And when I look at, let's say, Professor Remy, anytime I played with him, he was ahead of me. Well, he didn't have any certified kills, but he had a number of street fights and duels and battles, from the Doc days and Balintawak versus Dosei Pares type of thing. And it was like touching hands with these guys, along with being able to see what was coming, going back to the very, very first thing you're talking about. And then the last part was, you trained with Remy. Who can understand him? He was hard to understand. He had that thick accent, and he never worked to better his English. So after about 5 years, I stopped listening to him, but I really watched him like a hawk, and I felt him. And then it was like, okay, replicate what I'm seeing and feeling. All of that kind of went in my martial arts experience. And this is where, like I said, I come to recognition of senior analytical thought. So yeah, you not only see the punch, but you see the angles, but even more importantly, in the long stretch, you recognize it without having to worry, figure, all at a high rate of speed. And so yeah, long-term benefit of that. And again, I'm glad that you got that out of it, because that was one of my biggest discoveries, one of my absolute biggest discoveries.
It just reminded me of a story that I haven't told in a while. I don't think I've ever said it publicly, but when I was a blue belt, a friend of mine was I think it was a red belt in Taekwondo. And we were hanging out. I think A Force of one of the Chuck Norris movies had just come out, and thought I was Chuck Norris, as we all did. And these two kids came down the street. It was on a hill, and bumped right into my friend. And then my friend said something, and there was this little exchange of words. And we were young, 6th, 7th grade. I don't even remember. Probably 7th grade. And then the kids left, and I was like, Ron, man, why didn't you take him out? You know, you're red belt, you know, you're Korean, you know. And he's like, oh, you know, screw him and whatever, and let's go get some pizza or whatever. And we get down to the landing of this thing, it lands, and then it goes hills again. And from around the corner on the other side, that kid and the other kid come back, and I'm like, oh, that's it. We're gonna take these guys out. And then behind them, about 14 kids came. Oh man, we got jumped. And
God.
I just went down and covered my face, and these kids were punching and punching, and like 6 and 7 of them at one time on me. And the whole time I kept thinking, as I peed my sweatpants out, I literally felt it just drained. And I kept thinking, okay, the next time he does this one, I'm going to do this, because that was a one step I learned, right? And as soon as, okay, now the other guy's here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to step crossover and side kick him. And then I'm going to front kick them. And then by the time I got through the thought process, the kids ran because cars were honking. And my friend Ron was 2 blocks, and I ran after him. And then when we got to his house, I was like, I need some clothes. And we were all beat up, and the punches weren't that hard, but there was enough kids, you know, that you're getting pummeled.
Yeah.
And I just thought, I got real bummed out that day. I thought, why was I thinking about all the stuff to do, and I didn't do a single move? And how fast they were all punching, there's no way you could have done 3 moves to his 1 anyway, right? And I just like, I need to start looking at these arts differently. And that was like a moment for me of, you know, they has to be reflexive. It has to be muscle memory. You have to train, like you're saying, you see the line, you have the right reaction, there's no time for analytical thinking. And, you know, still, I was still young in the arts, and I don't know, however old you are in 7th grade, but it stuck with me, you know, that experience, that if we had a training method to teach that, because the one steps never matched the sparring. So I didn't really know what to do. Do I spar these guys, or do I one step them? I didn't know. Yeah.
Well, you know, it's funny because not quite as rugged, but the first time I started doubting traditional karate blocks, oh boy, I'm very, very early. I think I've got my blue stripe on my white belt, and I'm on this bus, and George Johnson was one of the school bullies like that. And yeah, he's picking on me, and I'm getting up to get off the bus, and he grabs me. And so I push on him. Well, he let go the same time that I push him. Bam, right back in the seat. I get off the bus. I hear from behind me, George, no.
Oh.
I turn around. I see this punch arcing down at me. I start to do a high block. Bam, right in the eye. He turns around and goes, I'm like this. And it was one of those that was the first things, like, I mean, I'd always been taught this was to block this. And it didn't work. Like, ay. So that was always in the back of my mind regarding traditional blocks, which is why I get into parries and guards, et cetera, et cetera. But yeah, it's funny how we each have each of these type of things.
Right. So I got to bring us back to to class with Lorne Christensen, because you get into class and you're absolutely killed. I mean, you're head over heels for karate.
Yep.
Right. And it's like that's it. The world has changed. I know exactly how that feels. Happened me too. Like, this is it. Yeah.
Yep.
What was it about the class? Because for me, there's a lot of cultural stuff involved that gets me, you know, I was in a Taekwondo school with a Korean instructor, and dragons on the wall, and, you know, all kinds of different stuff that puts me in a different place. But for you, it's like, for what I'm hearing, it sounds like just a gym or a room, white guy with a green belt on, and you're still enamored of it. Like, was it the warrior spirit? Was it something about the way the moves looked, or the gi snap? What do you think grabbed you?
Well, one of the first things that got me was that, like I said, Bruce Lee was out. James Coburn was kind of like off to this side, and there was this very exotic thing that was happening. Now, so I go in the class and I'm learning these moves that are terrifically foreign to my body. I always tell people that karate is not unnatural, but boy, oh boy, is it certainly untrained. So I'm doing these foreign actions, which all are dynamic, and they're probably about 10 times more dynamic in my mind than they were actually on the floor. And it was just something really indefinable, to be perfectly honest, that grabbed me. Now, following that, see, we had two instructors. Lorne took, I think, it was either Monday, Wednesday, or Tuesday and Thursday. There was Lorne Christensen on one day, and then Mike Angelen on the other day. And these two guys were yin and yang. Lorne, he worked out twice as hard as everybody else in the class. So he led everything. I mean, he was out there. So as hard as we were sweating and this and that, man, he had his water waders on, so he could navigate the pool of sweat he was leaving on the floor under him. Wow. So, and he was like a hard worker. And Mike seldom dressed up. So you do this, do this, do this, do this. So part of it was the intensity of the workouts that Lorne was doing. And then I was in this thing that, self-defense, but going back to my older brother, who was the hood, see, he was the cool guy in school. He was the guy that was necking with all the girls. I thought, if I did karate, I get the self-defense, maybe I could be cool.
Yeah.
So on that one, the jury's still out. Okay, 57 years later,
has
the jury's still
yet?
out on
Are you cool yet?
Hard saying, but I have a wonderful family life, so I don't need to be cool now.
You don't need to be.
But the thing is that there was, and the other thing is, now here's an interesting thing, is that and this is something I firmly believe. I think everybody is exceptional in something. Many people never find that something that they're exceptional in. But you get a chef. Okay, the chef is the guy. How much salt? That much salt. That much paprika. Blah blah blah. You get somebody like, let's say, okay, Larry Bird. Larry Bird's one of my heroes. Okay, and along with Michael Jordan, the thing that keeps getting overlooked was the work ethic that was behind the desire. But what was the bedrock under the desire? There was something about it that caused them to excel. Now, for whatever reason, martial arts seemed to be my area. But you can get anybody in anything. Old comic book people, Jack Kirby, from the marvelous dynamic illustrator. Okay. Dolly Parton. I'm not a big country western fan. She is awesome. Tina Turner, for crying out loud. Or they found their particular niches where they had the natural elements to being unbelievable, and they found them. They worked their heinies off, etc., and they became unbelievable. Martial arts, for some reason, ended up being mine, and I did very well in terms of karate competition. I was a regional, national, and world champion. It zoomed over into Filipino martial arts, where I'm doing all right. And but the thing is, and then same thing with book writing, blah blah blah. That was the other thing, which, for whatever reason, unspoken at the time and even unarticulated, I found my thing. And boom, 57 years later, that 6-month fad is still going on. Yeah. So I that's about the only way I can put it. Actually, nobody ever asked me that before. That was a good question.
Thank you.
Yeah. I had another question that was asked of me 2 weeks ago, and I was doing a video interview with a guy by the name of Senfusi Hightower, and he goes, "So, first question, Dan, what's the one question you wish somebody would ask you that nobody's ever asked you?" And I went, "Oh, I like that." Right. And the question was, "What keeps you going?"
Right.
What keeps you going? I mean, it's research. It's filling in, or it's handling loose ends. Now, example, my first book, The Hair Book. That was the book I wanted to read. That was the book I wanted to read. There
Right.
weren't any books out there like that. You had self-defense primers, you had style primers, you had historical things, you had books of basics. You know, how many books of basics can you go high block, straight punch, forward step? But let's get down. And so it was one of those where you'll like this story. This is funny because I actually had it written, the bare bones of it written in 1974.
Hmm.
And who was the biggest or the most prestigious martial arts book publishing group in the world? It was the group you worked for, Tuttle, Tuttle, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I sent the manuscript to Richland, Vermont. I sent the pictures to Richland, Vermont.
Right.
They were interested, but they didn't like the pictures. Reshoot the pictures. The floor had a pattern on it that looked like a kitchen floor. Redo the pictures. I was too cheap to redo the pictures. They opted out. They didn't publish. And so it goes later to 1969. I'm at a tournament. I'm talking to Paul Maslach, who was the editor of Inside Kung Fu.
Right.
And Paul had written 2 books on the subject of fighting.
Strategy in Unarmed Combat and What the Masters Know. Come on.
Right. Well, the thing was, he posed for the pictures, and you could tell from the outfits that he did and what he did, they were all theoretically wonderful, but I don't think the guy ever had a nosebleed in his life, you know? And I looked at that, and so I'm talking to him. I'm telling him about the Tuttle story. And Mark, honest to Pete, he looks at me straight away and says, Dan, you write it, I'll publish it.
There you go.
And I go, are you sure? He goes, yeah. It was on a handshake. 9 months later, handwritten, sending it to the steno pool where this gal's doing like 3 cents a page, 3 rewrites. It's done. I send it to him. I fly down with my lead student, Bill Rookledge. I don't know. You remember Ed Ikuda? Yeah, from the photographer from Inside Kung Fu. Anyway,
but his name was in the magazine every month.
Yeah, he was a photographer, brilliant photographer. Well, I had pages of outlined notes on sequences. Fake back fist into body punch. A number next to it, 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I liked the in-between pictures to see how it actually went, and this was the first book that had the actual transitional pictures, right? So we do about, I think he said, over 1,200 pictures one day, because I had every sequence in order outlined. He said I was the most organized guy that he had ever seen. They cut it down to 750 pictures because of, back then, print. It cost X amount of bucks to, you had the same thing happen with Filipino martial culture.
Yeah.
You had your idea of a completed project, and then the editors and the money counters go, well, sorry, this is going to bump, 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 and they cut things, right? Well, I had the same thing with my book, but it was the thing that I wanted to read. And everything that I've printed, either videoed or published or whatever, have been a result of research projects. Here's a hole. Good. How does Dan explain that hole? Here's another hole. How does Dan explain that hole? In any kind of trade, the sales go up and down. Some people find certain things interesting, some people don't. Like one of my most recent ones that I had a lot of fun writing. I'll pull this out in front of you. And this is obviously a promo copy, but inspirations, okay? A lifetime of literature on the martial path. What books have influenced me? There. How has it influenced me? There, and I detail all these different books that I read, and then I have certain authors that I go, buy anything by these guys. Lawrence Kane, Chris Wilder, Robert W. Smith, Don Drager, Mark V. Wiley. All these different guys that I go, man, read this stuff. Read it, educate yourself, because it has impacted my martial path. So there have been a lot of people that have written me, Dan, wow, this has done this has done that. Thank you very, very much. And it's kind of like, boom, anything I can do to make your journey easier by filling in holes, just like the same thing you mentioned about the desensitization. See, I said it. The desensitizing the oncoming blow It's, man, that's my give back. That's what just tickles the hell out of me. And so anyway, I don't even know how I got on that rant, but oh, on the question, yeah, I like that question that you asked. You know, what was it that got me? And you know, like I said, the closest thing that I can really answer is that my thing, I clicked into my thing, and boom, ran with it. So
let me ask you about this. When your
yeah,
guys are sparring back in the 70s in tournaments, now, is this when it was hand wraps and or nothing, or is this when it was safety chops? Is before the safety chops, right? And the safety kicks.
yeah, before the safety gear, and depending on the region that you were in, uh, the degrees of contact varied. You know, Pacific Northwest was a number of years behind the rest of the country, so it was very strictly, yeah, a little bit of body contact, no head contact. Texas, totally different. You know, you know, Texas to me was the roughest game in town, but it was the cleanest game in town. You knew what to expect. 1973 Dallas, Texas, when I won the U.S. Championships, the lightweight division, my first match. I'm coming from the Northwest, and I'm fighting a kid by the name of Dennis Passeretti, Kid Paz, one of George Pizarro's guys. I read about him in Official Karate. So you know, we get together, bam, I hit him with a low kick to the cup, pow, hits me right in the mouth. I go back to the line, I'm thinking, okay, I got the point for the low kick, or I got the point for the contact. Point, punch.
Wait,
okay.
what?
Okay, bam, I hit him again, pow. Now my lip is bleeding. So, okay, I got the point for the low kick. Mouth is bleeding. Point, punch. Like, looks like we're not in Kansas anymore, Toto. so,
Yeah.
so I had to buck up. Bam, bam, bam. Spin back, side kick, spin back kick, side kick. I beat him 3-2. But this was Texas, okay? Bare knuckle. California, you could dig to the body harder, but you couldn't hit to the head that hard. It basically escalated when they had the safety punch. And the first year of the mandatory safety punch was really interesting because the whole control of the head thing, we started looking like wild swinging punches, right? Well, our control to the head was actually calculated near misses. It could come very close, but you would be at full extension, and it wasn't controlled. It was a highly calculated miss. So it took about a year for all of us to adjust the proper distance so we were actually hitting. And but yeah, you know, different areas of the country. Now, the only area of the country that I didn't fight in was like the Metro New York area, and I did get to fight some guys from New York, and you know, they were strong, a little more classic oriented. Didn't get to fight the Koreans, Korean stylists. So you get guys like Joe Hayes. I would have loved to fight Mike Warren. I've heard nothing but
I heard he was awesome.
brilliant stuff. I heard he was Bill Wallace with both legs.
Wow.
That's what I heard about Michael Warren. Yeah, Joe
Alan
Hayes, Mike
Steen?
Warren.
Did you fight Alan Steen?
Mr. Steen was way ahead of me. He was, I mean, you know, Alan Steen, 1964 International Karate Championship, beats Joe Louis and Chuck Norris same night. yeah, just like
underachiever. Yeah,
and but anyway, yeah. So the bare knuckle days were interesting. One of the things I loved about the bare knuckle days, and one of the things I loved about those days, was that if you cheap shot somebody, you knew something was coming back. You knew something was coming back, and so it was a little bit more honest in that way, in my estimation. And it's the same thing with the gear. You know, you plowed somebody, you expected it to come back. So, you know, it was a bit more slam bang. The Pacific Northwest wasn't as slam bang as some of the other areas, but you know, different regions were different regions. Vancouver, BC, actually, at times was as tough as Texas. St. Petersburg, Florida, was a tough area. While I think California and Georgia and Minnesota, where they had the Diamond Nationals, I think were more technical areas. So depending on where you went, you had a certain culture, but you also had the ring rules, which sometimes were different than the written rules. And one of the things I learned really quickly was what the ring rules were. So
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, yeah.
Did you ever make the transition from, so it's like point sparring, bare knuckle to the safety chops? Did you ever jump to the kickboxing phase?
I trained in PKA cell kickboxing,
Yeah.
but I was a huge boxing fan. So I knew about the purses that high-level boxers would get. And to train very, very hard, to do the running, do the weightlifting, that countless hours of bang, bang, bang sparring.
And get nothing.
Make $500?
Yeah.
Oh man. I wasn't that dorky. So I stayed with the point thing. Number one, but number two, there was also a self-interest here. My division, Benny Urquidez, Howard Jackson, Demetrius Havanas. There was no way with those three guys there that I was ever going to be national world champion. Each one of those guys, full contact wise, would have just lit me up. And so two reasons: no money. Benny.
Yeah, that's it.
Oh, I don't want any of that.
Yeah. Benny was a hero, big hero of mine growing up. Don Wilson was a hero.
I never got to meet Don. He's still on a bucket list of meeting people, because I've read nothing but great things about Don Wilson.
Yeah.
Yeah.
He tells good stories too. He loves to talk and tell stories. Yeah. Where did you see Arnis and then decide that, hey man, this thing's grabbing me now? It's a new grab.
I was at the peak of my karate competition in 1980, but in the back, or 1979, but in the back of my mind was, where to from here?
Right.
And I met Professor Remy in Oakland, California. I was rooming with Fred King, and Fred was a huge influence on me, good buddy. But Fred was always one of these guys that had a seminar of this or that or the next thing to school. Danny, this guy's a Qigong guy. You got to come. Let me punch him in the face. Danny, this guy's a really great kung fu guy. Yeah. I whipped kung fu guys. Go away, don't bother me. And that was my attitude. I was a rather cocky little champion. I was, Super Dan's not going to do Tai Chi. Come on, guys, give me a break. So anyway, we're in Oakland, California, and he's got this Remy guy with him, and I can't understand it. And I'm trying to blow this guy off like nobody's business. I can't get rid of this guy. And he's rooming in the same room. Fred, you didn't tell me he's rooming with us. 6 o'clock in the morning, I'm hearing practicing Decadena trapping hands. Guys, come on! It's 6 in the morning. Pull the covers over my head. Sound stops. Hour later, I hear it from the distance in the parking lot. Clack, 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 clack. These guys are doing Sinawali drills. 7 in the morning in the parking lot. Guys are nuts. Okay, so there's the day of the tournament. There's the intermission. It's during the intermission. I still can't shake this guy. I can't shake him. And then there was this time I was
that sounds just like him.
I was in the subway, and there was this guy, and Donnie grabbed my wrist. And I thought, oh God, kill me, hang me now. Just somebody shoot me. And either I physically or spiritually rolled my eyes up in my head like this. And so I do the grab, and the next thing he does this utterly simple, lifts his arm, walks under the arm, a breakaway move, right? And I've seen this move in jiu-jitsu and aikido, etc. But the thing that nailed me right at that moment. Now, keep in mind, I've been competing in black belt division. I've been a national champion. I've seen all kinds of confidence. I've seen Jeff Smith own the auditorium the moment he walked in. I've seen Joe Louis hit people with the laser beam of his looks and decimate them. I've seen people have a blustery show of confidence, but they were nervous. I've seen all this kinds of confidence. He executed this move with the feeling that it never occurred to him that it wouldn't work.
Yeah.
And I spotted that. And all of a sudden, my head went 180, and it's like, oh, I got to keep my eyes on this guy. And this guy had put up with my shit for like the last day and a half. So fast forward about 4 months, and he had a 2-day seminar in Portland, Oregon. Leonard Trigg put it on. And like my first lesson in karate. It spoke to me. You know, any weapon I had always worked, I didn't like. You know, so you get the 6-foot bow staff, you got the nunchaku, you got the kama, you've got this is that. Well, this little 30-inch stick spoke to me. So, and then the other thing was, and you remember this from the first Remy seminar you did, was at the end of this seminar, oh, now you go teach. Like, yeah. Really? I don't have to be like a black belt to teach? Oh, good. If I teach this, I can work on this. And
that was his genius.
Yeah, and his empowerment, you know. So in the long run, what has kept my body moving has been Arnis, has been the flow. So I remember when I first met Bruce Chu. Do you know Bruce?
Yeah, of course.
And he runs into a guy who was a friend of mine who used to be a student later on. He goes, God, he's 70 years old and he's good. and it was one of those, is like, the reason I can move and I don't have the shoulder problems or the elbow problems have all been the flow. So people will ask me, well, what are you doing? Yeah, are you training? No, I've been training karate for years. But I'll pick up a stick and I will move. And it's funny because an old student of mine, Tim Gustafson, and if we look at my own thrust in Arnis, okay, I've gone past the point where, do I need to be the best? Do I need to stick fight these guys? Well, who gets in stick fights? Do I fight in stick tournaments? No. Will I play with somebody? Absolutely. I'm waiting for the next time you and I hook up because I want to see if you're going to hit me in the damn thigh again with that stick. Yeah. You know, or.
That's because I'm short. That's the only way I can reach.
Well, maybe I'll have to punch and you'll have to desensitize or something.
I think so.
But Tim had said, there is joy in movement. Oh, does that, and that flow, the movement of the flow, and how to counter the joy in the movement. That is what really speaks to me with Arnis. And this is with any type. You know, I mean, my base is Professor Remy. You know, I was didn't have any other teacher for 21 years than Remy. And then I watch, you know, Bobby Tabuada. I watch his dynamics. Okay, so I don't rely on the hardness of the stick to do my damage for me. Let's put some stank on it, you know. And that's like, okay, Bobby T. The classical movement that you reignited in me, using two hands at the same time, from what I call the original, the classical Balintawak that Ted Buat taught me. And I only had a smattering of lessons, but the impact was incredible. But all this stuff that goes like this into my body expression. And so this is the art that, you know, carried me into the 21st century. It wasn't karate. And in fact, if with the exception of turning a light on somebody else's, over the top of somebody else's head karate-wise, karate bores me. Mm-hmm. Just bores me. But then again, I've answered all my questions in karate too.
Right.
Yeah. You know. So and Arnis is still, So but anyway, that's how I started with Professor Remy, and I'm sure he cultivated me. I mean, he was a smart guy. Oh, super done. He is my student. I talked to Roland Dantas. Roland's heard of me. Well, why? Well, because I was Super Dan. I wasn't all known, and he's hooked up with Remy, and it's a promo thing for Remy, and so we really, I'm sure I got a lot more out of our association than he got out of it. Know, but that's how I met him, and that's how I'm sticking with it and having a great time with it. But transformation number 2. Number 1, karate with Lorne Christensen. Number 2, Remy Presas.
Number 3, Scientology.
Right on the list. Number 3, Scientology.
Come on.
Yeah. So, go ahead.
No. How did that come about? Because, well, you're up in the Northwest.
Well, I'm up in the Northwest, and Fred King is he's a training partner. He's a Kaju Kembo, originally a Kaju Kembo guy, and at that point, he was with Aldecasso's One Up Kundo. And then he finally morphed into his own expression, Modoc Pai. But there was something about Freddie that was different. You know, Fred always had a smile on his face. He's always good natured. I mean, he was a warrior. He was a roughneck and thug.
Mm-hmm.
But his attitude, there was something about him that was very, very positive, very positive. And you know, and he was constantly encouraging Scientology this, Scientology that, and I had heard about and had seen a little bit, but from people who were disgruntled critics, and so I was kind of like, he and his sister-in-law, I was dating his sister-in-law at the time. They finally, okay, you know, got me into the organization, and there was this one interesting thing that just nailed me. Was there were secular aspects of Scientology. It wasn't just an immersive spiritual thing, but there were secular aspects. And there was this communications course. Oh, communication? It has a formula? Really? And, you know, L. Ron Hubbard had broken down communication into this, and you had this drill which developed that, and you went until you had a grasp of communication. And in the end, it wasn't communication of the type that I speak, you wait, I stop, you pounce variety, but there was a way of actually having two-way communication. So that was the first thing. And then without getting into specifics, not because they're embarrassing or this or that, but because I could talk for hours and hours and hours. And the best thing is like, it's like coffee. You like coffee, Mark?
I love it.
Yeah. Well, how do you know you love coffee? Because you experienced it.
Yeah.
You know, you didn't read about it. I didn't convince you about it. You took your first cup of coffee and went, well, this is bitter. Maybe there's something better. Oh, hey, this is good. Oh, you know, if I put a little cream or milk in it, you know. So what happens is you have your personal experience of coffee. And like with me, it's one of the 4 basic food groups. So, but here's another one. Do you like sauteed mushrooms?
Yes, with butter.
I hate them.
Yeah.
I think the only good use for sauteed mushrooms is firing them from a wrist rocket at disobedient children because the splat is epic. But how do you know you like mushrooms? Because you ate them. How do I know I hate mushrooms? Because I ate them and I hate the texture and I hate the taste. So it ends up being what's true for you is what's true for you because you've experienced it. You didn't read about it, et cetera, et cetera. So the thing that for me, that really resonates in Scientology is that in terms of either spiritualism or religion, nothing spoke to me. This one spoke to me. And one of the things I love about pretty much any religion is that it goes deeper than this, you know. And it was via Scientology where I really got a grasp of myself as a spirit, as a human spirit. You know, the body dies, there's still Super Dan in some sort of form that now will slide into my view, that will go and get another body and do this again. And it's not like a reincarnation thing where if I'm an evil boll weevil, good, I'm going to come back as somebody's dog. It's just, great, you got that life, I'm in this life, we have that life. And the fascinating thing is, for me, I always knew I was special. I didn't know how. I always knew I was different. Well, the difference was I wasn't this. I was an individual as a spiritual being. Oh, that's how I'm different. You mean everybody else is different too? You know? Everybody else is a spiritual being. Well, son of a gun. And through this, I have transformed into an individual who you can trust, who you can honestly like, or you can honestly disagree with, or. But the thing is, it's made me a human being that others can be around. And in the words of Ghostbusters, not be slimed.
I'm a very spiritual person, and it's like those, when something speaks to you on that deep level, it's like the compass shows you where it's true north for you.
Yes.
And now you're like this. So
Yep.
people know that Dan is true north, Mark is true north. They're not liars, they're not cheaters, they're not shining you on. Good people. And our true north could be different, doesn't matter. It's still true.
Yeah.
It's still north. You know, we're just on a different escalator north, you know,
Yeah.
going to the same place. And I think that really it's so much better than being scattershot. You know, some people find that spirituality in their martial arts too.
Yep.
You know,
well, the thing is, well, here's the interesting thing
very
about
similar.
Here's the thing about spirituality in the martial arts, and I'll go over this with students and parents and so forth. You know, because the last one, well, do you teach Zen or do you teach? And I said, no, yeah, that's religion. That's extremely personal. I don't go there. But when you achieve a new belt, you do the side kick and say, oh, that felt good. The question is who felt good?
Right.
Did the body cause happiness in you? No. It's the you that is the honest to goodness you that feels good. Who gets their heart broken? You know, your body, the heart doesn't shatter. No, you go into grief. Who has the elation? Who has who feels good about the partner that you're hooked up with? You
right.
know, and I've seen you talk about, look at that smile. I've seen you talk about Kelly. You know, it's like, that's the woman who brings a smile to your face.
Yeah,
Marie's the one
sure.
who brings a smile to my face. But it is the spiritual to the person, you know, that creates this situation. And that's who it goes to first, then it manifests out in the body. So, yeah. And a lot of people, martial arts is very spiritual. Brilliant. I love it because it builds them up as an individual being, and boom, you know, that's the only way I get spiritual in martial arts. It's like, yeah, good. Who's feeling good? You know, yeah. Are your lips feeling good? How about your little?
It forges the spirit, right? I mean, when you're getting
quoting Enter the Dragon
Texas for the second time in the same place and your lip is bleeding, you got to continue on, right? It's like earn your medal, right? It's like you got your spirit to keep going and not give up. The fighting spirit, right? The I can do it spirit. The let me get to the next level, even though I can't kick waist high. I'm going to go until I can to pass the test, you know, or whatever it is.
And here's a good example of exactly that. You know, when the pandemic hit, you know, I transitioned over to Zoom and I was teaching my karate classes and that sort of thing. And then when our governor, Kate Brown, who actually was on a list of the least liked governor in the 50 states.
Nice.
Oh, Kate. Oh,
hey,
yeah,
she made a list.
Yeah, she was.
Not everybody makes a list.
Exactly. But, you know, when she came out with her phase 1 requirements, it was one of those, it's like, I'm looking down and it says karate, taekwondo, mixed martial arts schools may not open because of the physical contact. And here is where the I can do it or the spirit came in, because, you know, I'm thinking, okay, Kate Brown, what does she know? You know, because all the restaurants and all these guys, and they're crabbing at her. So she's getting inundated with all these complaints and possible lawsuits. And I'm thinking, okay, well, what does she know? She's a politician. She knows politics. Okay. What does she not know? My business. Okay. So let's educate her. Let's not complain about anything. Let's educate her. So I wrote a 2.5-page petition showing exactly how one can maintain safety standards, how one can train, all the way from when you're at the door getting the temperature scan to 6.5-foot square boxes with a dot in the center on the floor, and how they're mimicking the instructor. And the whole idea was it can be done. I sent it down through the CEO of our Chamber of Commerce. 3 hours. I get a reply back. You're open.
Nice.
And it was one of those that it was like you said, you know, you get hit in the face, and it's that fighting spirit. It's that can do spirit. And I opened up my school right away, and I had, half my guys on the floor, half my guys on Zoom. Okay, all good. But it was that thing from, I wouldn't have done that had I not been a Scientologist. One of the viewpoints of, well, you see the shirt, IAS, International Association of Scientologists. One of the slogans is something can be done about it.
Nice.
Okay. Yeah. That's what, when I look at, anything in my life, and it's not, it's not just the church or whatever, but in the martial arts, something can be done about it. My upcoming spider ride to Connecticut. Okay. I'm having to raise money to pay for getting the bike road ready and then cover expenses. Okay, what do? Do I sit back and whine about it? No, start putting on special sales. Something can be done about it. So that's like my driving thing. And like you said, you get hit in the lip twice, man. That's the fighting spirit. That's what forges you forward. And that was the unbelievable, scary, good spiritual boost that I get from Scientology. Something can be done about it. And the only thing is, this is a really trite thing because everybody says it, but the only thing that's going to stop me is me.
Yeah.
Well, perhaps I should stop stopping myself.
I know one thing for sure is that people who are overtaken by martial arts, like you and I, and there's a lot of us out there, can be very selfish with our time and our needs of what we want to do. And yet we have spouses and children. How did marriage and family life transform your martial arts training and from a selfish, single focused guy to having to manage that and a family?
Well, that's very interesting because see, my fourth thing on transformations is fatherhood.
Fatherhood. Yeah.
Fatherhood. See a big smile on your face. Brooke and Alex come to mind. I have my kids, and which when you post, it's really surprising. I blink and they've gotten old, man.
Oh my God, they're old.
You're probably empty nesting now, right? Yeah, that's an interesting phase.
Brooke's heading out to college. Alex has graduated 2 years ago. I mean, come on.
Brilliant.
Just little. Yeah.
I remember. Well, anyway, my first wife, Lynn, she was a karate competitor. And at this point in time, I'm not family oriented. This is 84, I believe, when she and I got married. And we were kind of like a combination of fire and ice. But the thing was, is that we both ran the karate school, etc. But there was a family thing that was missing. And in the long run, it was kind of like, apples and steaks. She's a great steak, but I wanted something closer to an apple. So we fast forward a number of years, and I meet with Marie, and I meet with Marie through her church, but I meet through the kids also because the kids were training with me. So the oldest, Janelle, she took her self-defense course, and then she did karate, and then right down the line, Robert, Nicole, and Jessica, and then later Alexandria. And but the fascinating thing was noticing how the kids interacted with each other in the school. It's like, wow, I didn't have that growing up. Dysfunctional. That's the word I was looking for about 45 minutes early. Dysfunctional family. That's what I was used to. Did the kids hate each other? Yeah. Did we fight? Yeah. Did some kids kick the other kids out in the family? Of course. That's what a natural family does. That was my experience. Well, we're seeing these kids interact. I was like, wow. So anyway, I finally split off from Lynn, and then I segue into hooking up with Marie. And hooking up with Marie and the kids, there were two things, and this will relate into work, using the karate time and so forth. But it'll relate. There were two things that I did that were unusually brilliant, and I can't ascribe them to any. Well, I can ascribe one, but one of them was that my viewpoint was I didn't marry Marie. I married the family. So those kids were now my kids. And it didn't cut into their dads. No. In fact, they call me Pop just to differentiate between, and I call my dad Pop, you know, so they call me Pop, and it sets our goals. Now, the other thing was that when my mother married my first stepdad, he brought us all together and he informed us that a new deal was going to happen. Basically, the new deal was him favoring his kids over the other kids and punishing us more than Debbie and Diane, that sort of thing. So when I brought the family together, you know, and I brought the kids together, and I remember we're sitting in the bedroom and said, okay, well, you know, Mom and I are engaged. And, you know, I'm moving in. So I just want to let you know one thing. I'm not going to change a thing. I'm going to sit back. I'm going to be quiet. I'm going to see how this family runs. I'm going to learn the rules. Now, there's one thing you got to know about me. I don't say things twice. So if I say something, know that I'm going to say it once. And that's it. And they go, oh, okay. And then the other thing, the last thing that I did that was utterly brilliant was the professor never came home. Dan came home. And I would never bring up the subject of karate at home. The first time my blood daughter, Charlie, ever talked to me about karate was when she was training for a black belt test. Now, she'd been training for like 7 years. She was longer than that. She was a dojo rat. She was in the school at 3 years old. And then she was taking her junior black belt test at 12, 13. And she was smart. She morphed into the adults class to get ready for it. But we never spoke about karate at home. It's always Dad and Charlie. She asked me one day about a tactical thing or a technical thing. And I'm going, yes, finally. But Dan never came home. So the thing was that there was a conscious decision that was made that the family was the family. The martial arts was the martial arts. Now, I'm running the dojo, so I've got the martial arts business, and Marie's handling the books and so forth. Thank goodness. I'm a bonehead when it comes to the books. She's handling that. But when we go home, it's all Dan. When we're at the school, it's all professor, it's all sir. So they never called me Pops, Dad, Dan at the school. No. So we had our jobs extremely separate. And the kids did brilliantly at this as well. So it was a much, much easier transition than I thought. It was a much, much easier transition. And, you know, to be perfectly honest, I've got to ascribe it to the fact that, you know, Marie and her ex-husband did a brilliant job. And I wasn't going to throw a rock into the pond, man. I wasn't going to ruin that because, you know, lovely kids, lovely situation. Now I get to be in the kind of family that, yeah, not quite Ozzie and Harriet, but it was a hell of a lot better than my family. And so, you know, transitioning, you know, like transformations. Number 4, fatherhood. And so that was, you know, and now I'm empty nesting. Okay. And Marie and I are doing better. We're actually shucking and jiving with each other a lot more. And we have
a lot of super cute photos of you guys on Facebook.
Oh God,
hugging up and kissing and saying beautiful things, and it's really great.
Yeah, well, she's you know, she's a good egg. You know, when I was talking about Lynn and I, apples and steaks, and Lynn was a marvelous steak. Well, it got me an apple. So we got the Apple Andersons going on, and as trite as it sounds, you know, we've gotten actually closer. You know, I was telling this to her the other day. So, you know, we haven't done this settling in where we just kind of like drift to the bottom of the lake, and now we're just kind of, but we're actually a lot more
nice
like that. Yeah, and it's brilliant. You know, I catch the same thing when you make very infrequent posts about you and Kelly. You know, and I sit back, and every time I read about Kelly this, Kelly that, it's like, my boy's smiling. I like it. This is good stuff. So
he's just not feeling well, so I keep it out. You know.
Yeah. Well,
but she and I are extremely tight. Extremely tight.
And it sounds like she's a warrior as well. She's got that
stronger than me.
that would
Sure.
resonate with you as well. So it's
Yeah.
but yeah, no, that was but that's how I balance all that. You know, the business is the business. Uh, you know, with the family, you know, the family's out now. Okay, fine. Marie's got her own business, which is she runs a quilting shop, and she actually has me as an employee in the quilting shop.
Nice.
So I'm actually running the computerized long arm. With the long arm is just basically a big ass sewing machine. So I like to call myself the world's deadliest quilter.
That's
And
right.
but I am definitely the underling, and I've got to bow to her.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
And it's all good. It's all good. So
So I'm going to assume, and correct me if I'm wrong, that being almost a full-time author is another transformation.
yeah, and it's funny because
I mean, you crank
I
out these books, it's like insane.
well, one thing I tell people is I'm not afraid of the written word. I'm not. One of the things that the initial transformation was re reports or comments from the first book, the Hair book, which was you write in a way that's easy to read. You're writing
Right.
like you're speaking to us. So I wasn't doing all this highfalutin scientific speak. You know, keep your hands up, stupid means exactly what it means. Keep your hands up, stupid. And so that gave me the impetus to continue writing. And but the thing is that it's funny because transformation number 5, which started back in 1979, is when I was looking at the concept of transformation. More recently, especially with my last series of books, I'm morphing into I start from karate student, karate black belt champion, Arnis student, Arnis senior master, a meshing of those. So Dan's expression is now Dan's expression. It is not karate. It is not Arnis.
Mhm.
It is Dan's art. Dan gets as skilled with however that he gets. But my next transformation actually is I'm the white Sun Lutang, martial scholar.
Nice.
You know, and my last several books, I showed you the inspirations one.
Hmm.
Essays on modern artists, this
Hmm.
series of Facebook posts, etc. The Remy history book,
Yeah.
those are all much less technically oriented as they are informational from a Dan point of view. And this next one that I'm working on right now, and I'm finally doing a Mark Wiley, which is, Dan, slow down. Dan, slow down. Well, this one I'm taking my time with.
Yeah.
And this one, I've always been intrigued, and this is the first time I'm publicly saying anything about this. I've always been intrigued about Miyamoto Musashi's Book of Five Rings. You know, in the foreword, I write, "Why have I never written a book on strategy?" Well, the best book on strategy was written back in 1645, weeks before his death. Why rehash it? Well, what I'm doing, and trust me, I've blown from this project 3 times. I've actually literally got up and walked away and said, I'm not doing this. But it's taking the key tenets of the Book of Five Rings and putting them into a Y2K application
Nice.
from a Dan point of view. So let's say, example, in the Earth School, he makes a statement. My school is the Nidoichi Ryu school, parentheses, the way of using two swords as one. I just take this statement and I go, okay, how does this apply? I start talking about ambidexterity, how the double weapons in Filipino martial arts, including the stick and the empty hand, because the empty hand is as important. Bing, 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 bing. How does this apply in Dan speak? You know, because we don't carry around 2 weapons. We're not of a samurai class, so we don't get to cut down anybody we please with no consequences, as he did in his day. But can it apply? Does it apply? So I'm taking brief statements out of 2 different translations. I got it right here. Alexander Bennett who is a Japanese historian plus a Kenjutsu and Iaido guy. And then Kenji Tokitsu's massive Miyamoto Musashi, his writings, he's a karate guy. So we've got these translations from martial artists, not just historians, not just translators, but from martial artists. And then how do they apply Y2K? And it might not sell. I don't care. This is something that is a gap. This is a gap in current day literature. So shifting over being a martial scholar. Okay. It's the same thing with my next video that one of these days I'll finally get off my behind and do, but it's footwork hacks for free fighting.
Mm-hmm.
So far, all the footwork, all the setup footwork has been based on attributes. Can you bounce? Can you spring from this side to that side? Well, what do you do when you're 70 years old and your legs fatigue like mine do? Or you don't have that natural spring. Or, okay, well, I've come up with a series of things that work for 5-year-olds. It'll work for a 5-year-old. And they are screamingly simple. And then you throw them all into the mixing bowl. Now you are a moving target and you can strike, you can defend from whatever distance, blah, 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 blah. And the fascinating thing is your offense or defensive motion is based on what you were doing footwork wise at the time. So you don't have to think, am I doing defense? Am I doing offense? No, you're doing dit, 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 or dit, 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 etc. So in this way, morphing into a martial scholar so that, like I said very early in this broadcast, if I can make life easier for you, I've done my job well. If it's just one thing, like you said, the one thing that resonated with you, brilliant. I did my job well. I have a person who I figured out something that took something and it expanded their art or made their art better for them. Daddy's in heaven when he hears that. It's true. It's I tell my guys, if you get 10% of what I got out of the martial arts, man, I really did my job well. Because, like I said, transformation number 1, first karate lesson with Lorne Christensen, bam, changed my life this way. So yeah. So I like writing. I love print on demand. I worked in a print shop for 24 years. You worked for Tuttle. So you know the costs, you know how you have to balance materials and sales and bring back.
And cost of goods sold.
And yeah, the goods have got to sell, otherwise they're not going to do it. Well, now with print on demand, you can do it and you don't have to fuss with it.
Yeah.
And so, that's something that I'm so happy living in this particular era right now that I have the freedom to do this. And it's something that I don't mind doing until I'm about 90% done with the book. Then I hate it. Then I hate it. And I have to keep pushing to finish it. And then I give it to a couple people.
Hard. The finish is hard.
It is. It's
because you're tired, your brain hurts, and you're like, good enough, man. I'm about said what I wanted to say. And then, but if you don't finish it, it sucks. You got to finish it.
And the thing is, as you remember from me working on the Filipino martial arts basics and essentials in the book, I do everything myself.
Yeah.
I do everything myself. So right down to photo placement, typesetting, etc. So I'm doing all the dog work.
Yeah.
Which I like. But boy, you get about 90% into that, and you're tired of that crap. It's Miller time or something.
It's Miller time. No, it's pineapple and seltzer time, baby.
You got it. Pineapple and seltzer, that's right. But let me tell you, we go back into an interesting story. You probably saw on Facebook and on YouTube back in 2017, I competed. So
oh yeah, that's right.
I'm almost 65 years old. Well, the backstory on that is that I've got a 14-year-old girl who wants to become big on Broadway. So her academics are through the roof. Her drama stuff is through the roof. She has no time. but she wants to get better at sparring. And I'd had her for like since 7 years old or something. So she's one of my junior black belts. I said, okay, what day do you have free? Sunday. Good. Meet me at the school at 3:00. And we started sparring for about an hour every Sunday. And her parents are just happier than a big doo-doo. And she's happy. And she even kicks me in the face one time, that brat. But anyway, one of the first things I see is that, yeah, man, I can't do this super dance stuff anymore. Man, if I'm going to kick you in the head, I got to sweep you out. You're on the floor, then I'll kick you in the head. You know, the hips don't do it. So again, you know, the concept of something can be done about it. I thought, okay, well, instead of bitching, pissing, and moaning about what I can't do, let's concentrate on what I can do. So I got this wealth of experience and this limited amount of techniques. I thought, well, let's make a project out of this, because I love projects. If I have a goal, I'll do something. But if you want it, but to train to push the body, no. I'm past that. So can I re-hardwire the system? Oh, this ought to be interesting. So I get working with it, and it's like, I have front kick, I have straight punch, I have back knuckle, I have hook punch. That's it, with a wealth of experience. Well, you know, she's one of my black belts, and so she's not going to push the old man. Fine. So I get to a certain point where I'm really happy. I call it Bill Shaw. Hey, Bill, this is my project. This is what I want to do. Now, he's a senior as well as I am. He just fought in the internationals, won the senior division. And I told him, okay, now, but there's one thing you got to know. If you do any of this Y2K bend over and punch at me business for a point, I'm going to disregard that. I'm going to whack you in the head. I'm not into this whole Y2K of what a point is. I grew up in the 70s. You know, it's got to have some stank on it. And I'm not going to belt you, but your body positions and your structure, blah, 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 for me has got to be good. So I'm going to disregard any crap you throw at me. So we get out there and we're sparring once a week, and I'm still working on hardwiring the system. It's going very, very well. So I'm thinking, you know, we're buddies. So he's still not putting my feet to the fire. Let's go somewhere where they don't give a hoot about it. Let's go fight a tournament. And so I picked one tournament. It's in January. That weekend, the roads are iced over. Dang, can't do that. There's another tournament in March that's a Japanese style tournament that's in my hometown. So I go, oh, this ought to be good. So I called Jay Farrell, who's the tournament champion, the floor director. Says, Jay, so I don't tell anybody, but I want to fight in the tournament, the Yoshida Classic. And I said, but I have a question for you. He says, well, what is it? He says, will I be relegated to my age division? He goes, well, Dan, what do you want to do? I want to fight the children. 18 to 34. He goes,
I thought you meant 5 to 9.
Yeah, no, I want to fight. I want to fight the children, 18 to 34 black belt division. He goes, really? Yeah. I want to fight the children. And he goes, well, let me talk it with. I've got the dinner with the lead director. Let me get a few drinks in him and see what he says. So he calls me back in a couple of days and goes, you're on. I'm going. Good. So I go to the tournament and I fight in the seniors division, and I do that as a warm-up. Now, I hate to come off as either egotistical or whatever, but you know, I'm a former national champion. I'm a former world champion. I'm fighting old people. You know, it's like I'll use the senior division to warm up. And then so I win that division. Then I go into the 1834 division. And I take like a tie for third place. I had the time of my life.
Nice.
But I enjoyed myself more than in decades of any other type of tournament fighting. But the thing is that I had re-hardwired the system so that, you know, do I fall back into the marching cadences or whatever? No, I re-hardwired the system. It's the same thing with what I've done with Arnis. You know, ever since you and I played, God, I think I mentioned like 17 years ago. I mean, it was a long time, but it was the adding of the distance and the classical in with the other and re-hardwiring the system, so I don't look like the typical modern Arnis guy. You know, I don't know what it looked like. I look like Dan.
Yeah,
you know, but so long answer to that question, but do I find myself falling into that? No. One of the cool things, being at peace with myself as to what I can and what I no longer can do, what I can do, what I cannot do. But having this wealth of experience, that doesn't change. Having the tactics and strategies, that doesn't change. I have not yet gone senile, so I've got all this technical tactic. Yeah, ask my favorite critic. But the thing is that, you know, I've got this wealth of experience, wealth of all these memories of what I can do, et cetera, with a body that's in a limitation. Okay, I'm still about 8 steps ahead of the average bear, you know. So so I don't run into that.
Excellent. Well, I want to thank you for spending your morning with us. Super Dan Anderson, the professor, grandmaster, author, and very good friend.